Good evening and welcome to the Journey Home. I'm sure you noticed right away that this is a different night than usual, and so we start our new season. We've moved to Monday nights, and we did this for a number of reasons, one of which because we have other live shows that are beginning. But it also is a blessing for my own family. Now after 3 years, this is the beginning of the 4th season, but after 3 years I can have my weekends home with my family again, Friday, Saturday night with my 3 sons and my wife Marilyn. So this is the beginning of the 4th season. And as I contemplated beginning this Monday evening series of the Journey Home, I thought back at the beginning of the Journey Home series and remembered the first time that I sat down with the person whose idea it was to start this series, Mother Angelica herself. I remember sitting down with her as she described why she had envisioned this particular kind of program. And it came from what she had received from you, from your letters, phone calls and emails talking about your own struggles with the spiritual life, your own frustrations sometimes with children and friends who had left the Catholic Church and losing sometimes hope with their own spiritual journeys. She saw the need for this program. Well, now after 3 years and with your own response to the program, we continue into a 4th year. And I thank you for your support for this program as well as this network. So as I contemplated who would be the perfect guest for this anniversary program, it only made sense that we invite the very person who thought of the program, Mother Angelica herself. And so I want you to welcome Mother Angelica.
I'm excited. I've never been interviewed at EWTN.
You've been on 60 Minutes and other programs.
Everywhere, but never EWTN. So I'm excited.
I feel unworthy, though, to interview you, Mother.
Well, the Lord has always been so providential with us, you know, and so I'm ready for your questions.
All right. Well, the audience probably wonders, was Mother a convert? But there's a sense in which you all have to be converts. Isn't that true?
I think we all have, or should have. And we probably do and don't realize it, conversion experiences.
That's right.
They're not dramatic like St. Paul, you know. We don't even have a horse to fall off of, but...
That's right.
But I think all through our life, everybody's life, there is a time, and it may be a short time, maybe just a thought, when somehow God and loving God and living like the Lord says in the Gospels makes more sense than others. Now, we may not follow it, but we all have these conversion experiences that are so small, sometimes we don't notice them. You see?
That's right. And I know as I reread your book, that is wonderful. I recommend it to all those who haven't read the book, Mother Angelica, Her Life Story by Dan O'Neill. I'd read it a number of years ago when I first met you.
Yeah.
It's been about 8 or 9 years. And to reread it again recently, it reminded me that as we look at our lives, we can look back and see ways in which, oh boy, now that makes sense, and almost everything now has been a continuation of all of that. But at the time, we didn't know that.
That's right.
That's right. And I thought, I don't know if the audience knows your early struggles with the spiritual life.
Yeah.
And what I had proposed to you is to talk about your early journey of your spiritual faith, but if you could, relate it to the way the spiritual writers talk about that way in which we progress from the beginnings of the purgative way to a more illuminative way, to growing in union. But tell us about how the Lord brought you on that journey.
Well, you know, the Lord uses ordinary things to do great things. When my mother and father were divorced when I was 6 years old, to me it was a hair-raising experience. One, that I didn't turn to God. I was 6 years old. All I was is hiding behind an ice box because my grandma and grandpa went to the court, and before he left he said, now pray the judge lets us keep you. Well, I was petrified. So all I could think of was hiding somewhere, see? So I hid behind the ice box. And I wouldn't come out. When they came home, they kept calling and calling, and I was just breathless. I wasn't going to move. And finally, he said, he caught on, and he said, the judge said we could keep you. Well, I just shot out of there. You know? Now, that's an experience that I'm sure a lot of people have had. They don't see much in it, but there was a lot in it.
Yeah.
Today, because God has our whole life in his mind. I would not have the compassion, I don't think, for those people who are divorced or alienated in whatever way, if I hadn't gone through that experience. But I didn't have God in that experience. But it's okay, because God had me in that experience. And it was a part of a puzzle that would lead me into religious life years later. But you've got to go through certain pains and certain problems, and they may not be great tragedies in your life, disappointments. God uses a lot of disappointments in things, in people. And as we go along, God uses those things to keep bringing us closer to him. That's what we don't understand.
Some people will see those negative things in their life as, oh, what's going wrong, or what have I done wrong, or where as I noticed your own story, at some point the grace of God started to get you to ask, what are you saying to me, Lord? How are you drawing?
Right.
To see in this, though it was a negative experience, that still small voice was in there. And one of those experiences you mentioned was that time, remember that Christmas gift that was that yo-yo that was used?
Yes.
But what you realized was that it seemed like that was an awakening for you to see that because of your parents' divorce, you were viewed a certain way by other people.
Oh yeah, very definitely.
And that fed your ability to have compassion later.
Right. It's a matter of knowing that at that point, I was ostracized because I was the only child of divorced parents. I didn't have a place for them to go to, so that cut out girlfriends. Now, that aloneness has been a great help to me. See, today we have no silence anywhere. Even if you're in an elevator, you'd think you'd have some quiet, but no, they got it on, some kind of music, something. So our minds and hearts are filled with noise. It doesn't necessarily have to be music, just plain noise. And I think I began to learn. So God was working on me. And that's what we need to understand. God was working on me to a point where I was a loner. I was forced by society to be a loner. And to me, if I had people around, it just made more trouble. See? If I even had girlfriends, at recess I would go out and sit on the step somewhere, and they were playing a rope and this and wearing themselves out, and I think, how dumb, how stupid. So even at recess, I stayed by myself, you see.
But you struggled with that. I remember that one experience where your teacher is saying you could do so much more if you tried.
Oh, I was terrible to her. Oh, yeah, she'd have a whole lesson on this one person, she called her. And when I left the classroom, she called me back. She said, you know I was speaking about you. You could be all these things she expected me to be. And I looked at her and I said, she said, what are you going to do about it? I said, nothing. I don't like you, and I don't like people. I was gone, see, and I'm sure she was happy I was gone. But what seemed useless and fruitless in those times, God was preparing my heart and soul to listen to him. See, I didn't want anybody else, because I knew of divorced parents it wasn't going to pay anyway. I wouldn't get friends anyway. So God, in his infinite mercy, you just spoke about the three ways of spirituality: purgative, illuminative, and unitive. But see, God was working on the purgative right off the bat. I didn't know that, see. And in that purgative way, we don't understand a lot of things. We rebel against what's happening. Or worse, we just don't care what's happening, you see. So all of these things were absolutely necessary, as I look back, were absolutely necessary for me to have something inside burned away. The desire for the world, desire for things, desire for anything was automatically, slowly, by circumstances. But those circumstances, as unfair or unjust as they were, God used them to put me aside in solitude. And that's where we miss the purgative way for the average working person. for the average career person, or just a housewife or whatever. There is that element of purification that the spiritual writers call purgative, because they're all detaching us from what we think we want.
The attachments that
Yeah.
we have.
And that's in every lay person's life. God has arranged for all of us to be holy.
And that's something I want to make sure that we, as we talk about this, that one of the reasons we're talking about this is that these spiritual challenges for us are not just for ladies and habits.
No.
They're for every single
Everybody
one of us.
has it. Now, we rebel against them because we're always looking at human justice. See, this isn't right, that isn't right, this isn't right. But as I look back, God was preparing me to go it alone. But I had to wait till I was 18 to pass from purgative to see luminous.
The writers talk about that conversion, even a dark night.
Oh, yeah.
What was it that the Lord then used? First of all, purgative. We better define purgative. There's probably some people that don't know what the word purgative is.
Yeah. Purgative means, what it means is purification. We start being purified very early in life. And I did very early in life by that divorce at 6. I had to know hell began on that day. I knew it. Even at 6 years old, I couldn't have divined hell or defined it, but I knew that something terrible happened and I was going to have to go through it. But I never thought of God. I never thought, oh, God, help me here. I never did. See, because I went to school, but I didn't go to math that often. But even in this mumbo-jumbo of pain and sorrow and disappointment and poverty and hunger, God was working. Because I began to learn very early in life that none of these things really mattered, because I could be happy without them.
So purgative is also a way of God teaching you the importance of detachment.
It's a way of
isn't it?
detachment.
Yeah,
right.
That's such an essential.
That's why you'll find sometimes riches and poverty don't make you detached. I found some very wealthy people are totally detached from their wealth, from everything. And we find very poor people who spend their whole time wishing they had something else. So the purgative way, which everybody goes through, is a purification, a detachment from the things that really don't matter.
Okay. So what was it that the Lord then used to pull you from that first stage of the journey?
That was my first healing. I had a stomach obstruction and I couldn't eat. I was down to crackers and tea and very little things. And
this was a couple years leading up to that where you struggled with that pain.
Yes, at least 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, I was nervous and I didn't sleep at night. It was a mess. And this woman told my mother on the bus one day, she said, why don't you take her to see Mrs. White? She was a stigmatist and had been healed herself and was a very holy woman. Well, I didn't know what stigmata meant, and my mother wanted to take me. It was a blizzard. And I thought, well, you know, who cares? It's not going to mean anything anyway. I didn't have faith. I was not healed by faith. I was healed by God's mercy. I bet he looked down and said, if we don't do something with this creature, it's going to be a terrible thing. Anyway, I went to this very poor house. It was a shotgun house, you know, you could see right through it. The woman was poor, but she was holy. The first time that I saw something I never saw before. A person had something I didn't see before. There was no halo or light, but there was something there that I was amazed at. But being the pagan that I was, I could have shook that one off and went home, and I said this little prayer to St. Therese of the Little Flower, and on the 9th day, it was a Sunday, and I got up and I knew I was healed. I had a terrible pain in my stomach, and I went to the kitchen, and I said to my grandmother, I'd like a fried egg. She said, you can't eat fried eggs. I said, yeah, Grandma, I've been healed. Well, you don't tell that to Italian grandmothers, I can tell you that. Because she just stood there with her fork in her hand, and she said, what? I said, I've been healed, Grandma. And I have fried eggs? She said, sure. And I said, can I have some bacon? Bacon? I said, yeah, bacon. Oh, okay. I said, Grandma, I'd like a cup of your good coffee. She was amazed. I mean, just standing there with her mouth open. So I went in. My mother woke up by that time, and she was hysterical. What do you mean you're healed? I said, I'm healed. And she said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Mass. See, that was the first time I knew I had to do something God-like. You know, I had to do something that was on His side. His side. She said, you can't walk all that way. I said, yeah, I can. Well, I got dressed, and I walked 3 miles. Now, you're talking about somebody who could hardly keep her knees together, you know. And that was the first time in my life that I knew God knew me, loved me, and cared. And that was a surprise to me. But see, it took all of that pain, suffering, and aloneness to teach me. And then this miracle to me was awesome. Awesome.
Well,
I had to go, I went to Mass's office and I could, and I made stations across every day.
So, whatever happened to you spiritually at that moment, as the spiritual writers talk about the second conversion, changed your heart to all of a sudden have a hunger and a thirst you didn't have before. And what we'd like to talk about, if you would, is that not everybody has these miracles. Not everybody has the, as you also call it, you and I both use this phrase, the 2x4 between the eyes.
That's right.
People don't have that exact experience. So talk about, maybe in a more general way, what is this second conversion, and how can we identify it in our own lives?
Well, we all have it. We just don't see it. See, say there's been a tragedy in your life, a disappointment. You planned that this was going to happen, and there was something wonderful ahead, and it didn't happen, and there was tragedy ahead. Now, we don't call that an ecstasy. We don't call that a conversion. But it's an opening for a conversion. Because why? Why is it an opening? Because I have 2 ways to go. I can go to the world, I can bury myself in the world, or I can turn to God. Everybody, I'm convinced, and I don't care if you're a dishwasher in a restaurant, or a ditch digger, or an executive on top of the building, you do have many opportunities. If we would just turn to the Lord and say, Lord, I'm desperate, even if one falls in grave sin. See, there is something there that says, look, this is not all there is. Number one, you better seek the one who can help you. All those are conversions. See?
In fact, the spiritual writers I remember reading, which, again, in becoming Catholic myself and reading Catholic spirituality, it's been such an awakening for me.
Oh, yeah.
But to hear that, the way they describe it is sometimes that conversion happens when God draws himself away from us.
Very much.
Draws.
See, he does everything possible to make us seek him. See, that's what happened to me. The fact that I was healed, I feel, has to do with the mission God was going to give me way over here. See? Because one of the ecstasies Mrs. Wise had, the Lord said to her, Rita will do great things for the church. And she was so surprised. And she said, Rita? My Rita? She was shocked, you know. And the people around her told me years and years later. She couldn't get over what he was saying. But you see, the Lord was preparing me just like he prepares everybody. You see? It may be something as mundane as getting, well, it's not mundane, it's getting this particular college I want to go to, and you got your heart set on it, and you think you got your schedule already, and you got your friends gone there, and all of a sudden you don't make it. Now you're saying, Is that a point of conversion? Yeah.
It could be.
It certainly is, because there you're desperate, you're alone, you don't know where to go, and you don't know what to do. That's the formula for conversion. But you see, because we read too much, I think of the ecstatic books, we're waiting for this big thing to fall on our head, but it doesn't. It's the ordinary problems, the ordinary tragedies. It's the ordinary thing that hits my heart and makes me either terribly disappointed or terribly lonely or whatever, or terribly detached, especially when someone dies. That is the turning point to go to God.
Isn't it true that sometimes it can be a blessing that we didn't have this big miraculous, because some never get beyond that big miraculous, powerful
No question of that.
experience.
No question. And then you have to realize, but even though that purgative way, which means purified, anything you purify. If I had a rusty pipe in my hand and I want to make it beautiful again, I got to take a file and I got to get that rust off, you see. From the purgative to the illuminative, a lot of rust has to go.
Talk about the illuminative now. In that part of your own life, as you're now walking in that part of the journey, what does illuminative mean?
Okay, in my life, I realized one day after making the stations that I had to be a nun. I was the only one my mother had. I told my aunt, my uncle, they thought I was absolutely mental. So I pursued it, and none of the active orders, the orders who teach or nurse, would accept me because my grades were so low. You know?
So that was a blessing in disguise.
It was, but I didn't know that. You know, I was crushed. And so finally I went to this one place. It was the St. Joseph Sisters in Buffalo. And after 3-4 months, they wrote and said they decided to take me. But the counselors who had the vote had felt that I had a contemplative vocation. I didn't even know what it meant. So I went to Monsignor Habeck, all excited. I was accepted. And I said, they waited so long because they thought I had a contemplative vocation. And he said, yes, you do. I wondered, why didn't you tell me this a long time ago? You know, I've been looking and looking. I said, you do? He said, yes, I do. And I know exactly where you should go. I said, where? He said, Cleveland, Ohio. St. Paul's Shrine. He said, they're poor Clare nuns, and that's where you have to go. Wow. And that was another turning point, because I didn't know anything about a contemplative order, let alone that one. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew I had to go. I ran away from home. I had to wait 2 years because I was too young. I had to wait till I was 21. And my boss, I said goodbye to my mother on August 15th. And my boss gave me the fare for a bus. I went to Cleveland. And that was another turning point, you see, because I had to step into something I knew absolutely nothing about. See? And there I began to see what I could have never seen where I was. See?
Would you say that that second conversion, what it did, it opened your heart to be much more willing to say yes to God in a lot of unknowns, to be willing to take bold steps in areas of trust that you never would have before?
No.
So would that be a way of describing that that's a part of understanding our second conversion, that there could be this openness to God in these ways?
You see, there are three things that go hand in hand with purgative, illuminative, and the transforming one. The first, I was resigned to God's will. I had a vocation. See? But when I went to Cleveland, I was conformed to God's will. One, I can see it. The other one, I can do it. See? So I went then from that point in my life where I was resigned meaning not sure but doing it. The other one is really not sure but accomplishing it. See, I'm going another step forward. Now, being conformed to God's will and going into the illuminative way are about the same, because in conformity I understand a little better and I will do God's will, but it's still a mystery, you see. It isn't that my will and his will are one will. And that's where the average lay person can make giant steps, because he also has that darkness in his life. He also wants to do God's will. That's resignation. That's that purgative way. You got to change.
There's a mystery on both ends, of what God's doing and our obedience.
That's it, right. Our obedience becomes more clear as we go to that next step. Here, I'm obedient, but I got to change. I'm impatient. I like everything done yesterday. I don't like to wait for anything. I have a temper. And you know, this has got to go. But you still, it's a kind of rise and fall thing. You're going to go up and down, up and down. Now you're going to do that one thing that's going to change your life. See, over here, well, you're kind of here and there. But now I want to change my life, you see. And now I have to go from there. I'm conformed to God's will. And lay people do the same. You may have lost a job here, which you loved, and they go out of business, and now what? You see? But all of a sudden something else comes up that maybe you've never done. And you say, what's that got to do with holiness? Everything. Everything. Because now you're going into the darkness of something new that you're not sure of. So now you're going to go in faith, you're going to go in hope, and you've got to go in love. Otherwise you don't do anything for someone unless you love him a lot. So now even the average lay person that you say is in the world and working in the world suddenly becomes not of the world. See, there's that giant step. So now they begin to want to read a little bit more. You see, because their heart is hungry. They already see this is a good thing. It's a wonderful thing. They've made that little step into ice water. See? And now they're ready. They're ready to see God and to love him in the very thing they've had to give up. Now they're in something else. Now they begin to see. And now we've passed from something that was purgative and hard to do, and I'm not too sure. Over here now, I'm sure. It's still hard. It's still hard. But then we have a greater hunger for God. You see? We have that next step.
I remember when it became more aware to me that I had made that progress, was when I looked back and I recognized something had changed in my heart. When something great would happen in my life, I remember when I used to say, wow, I was good. But now all of a sudden my heart was saying, thank you, Lord.
Thank you, Lord. Exactly.
That change.
That's right.
That's grace. When our mind is changed to start seeing Jesus first as opposed to ourselves. Now, the other thing that the spiritual writers talk about is that when we move from the purgative to the illuminative, a lot of those early sins that were more obvious are gone. But new ones start popping up.
That's right, because you see yourself more.
Talk about that old struggle. Now you're in illuminative life. You're not perfect yet, though, right, Mother?
You see, there's a lot of things about ourselves we don't know. And we couldn't take it if we did. But now that I'm struggling with marbles, now I got to move mountains. See? And the Lord said if I had the faith, I could move this mountain. The mountain is me, you see. Over here, I could attest to my actions not too good. But over here, I know my thoughts are not too good. It's my motivation is not right yet. Because now you begin to compare your motives with his. Compare your ideas of justice with his ideas of justice. And you cannot read the gospel without knowing right off the bat, he doesn't think like you think. He thinks different. There's a man that had 10 talents, 5 in 1, and he gives the one away, takes it away from the one, and gives it to the one who has 10. And the apostles were amazed. Said, well, Master, you already had 10. Why didn't you divide it to the guy who had 5? You see, we don't think like he thinks.
Yeah.
And this is a surprise. So now I'm going away. I'm forgetting the marbles now. I know those are no good. And now I got something bigger. See, there's we're talking about also conformity. In the illuminative way, I must become conformed to God's will. I'm not too hot about it yet, but I want to do it. Over here, I'm thinking about it, and I resign. It's kind of a rotten deal, but I'll do it. See, over here, it doesn't so. You know, because you're beginning to feel in your heart. You've gone from your mind now to your heart, and you're beginning to say, I don't want to hurt him. I need to do this for Jesus. You see. So all of a sudden, Jesus becomes a dominant factor in your motivations, in your ideals, in what you want. And that happens to everybody, you know. People like me that he had to hit on the head and make suffer. And then at that point, too, Marcus, you begin to realize the beauty and the power of suffering. See, before it was in the way, unfair, unjust, and you can dump it. No. Suddenly begin to think, this is good. This is good for me. Then you begin to look back and say, well, you know, my father left my mother at 6 when I was 6, and that was good for me because it gave me something I would have never had. But I see it over here. I don't see it here.
It's good in the sense of Romans 8:28. All things work together for good.
And they taught me a lot.
That he's shaping you.
Right.
I'm going to pull you to the third stage.
Yeah.
Since those years, I mean, so much has happened.
Oh, yeah.
The Lord has brought you here
Oh,
to Alabama, the monastery, the first dish, you know, all that's happened here, and now you would never have dreamed back in those early days that you'd been the vessel of being able to take the gospel all around the world. What about that third stage? With all that's been happening, what about the unitive movement with God? How has that been in your own spiritual journey? I would think that the distractions of everything would maybe even be a barrier to that spiritual walk with Christ in that third area.
Yeah, it could be if you don't give credit where credit is due to the Lord. At that point, you can never say, God, I did a good job. You can't. Because you know in your mind and in your heart, you may have said yes, but after that, he bears the fruit. And you know that. Why do you know it? Because you still got a memory with A and B in it. You got the little marbles rolling around yet, and you got the big mountains you moved or tried to move. All that settles in the back of your mind somewhere. It keeps the lid on the ego. At that point, you can never say, I did a good job. The only thing you can say is he did it all. I have to say that because I know myself. And I probably, hopefully, as I grow older, will know myself more. But we have to know in the unitive way, we give all the credit to him because I finally found out that's where it belongs. See, I'll say, oh, Mother, you did a great work and all this. And I say, yeah, the Lord really blessed us. He's done great things. He said, oh, you're being humble. No, I'm not. It's the first time in my life I'm being truthful about what he does. See, you can't take any credit for anything because you're so aware of yourself. You see, the world tells you, no, you're great, you're this, you're that. But see, the Lord in the gospel says, unless you empty yourself, success could be the worst thing ever happened to anybody. See, because if you're not struggling to be united to Jesus, you can't take success. It's not a good thing sometimes. It's a terrible thing. And I've seen many, many people elevated to great positions and all, and they were so much better when they were fussing with marbles, you know? And something can happen to you up here. There's even spiritual pride.
Yeah.
We just don't worry about pride, meaning I get a better car than you have. I can have spiritual pride that says, well, look what I did. But you see, as you're getting closer to that unity way, the only thing that matters is Jesus.
Yeah. And I was thinking that your most recent experience that was touched on this is recognizing from the big picture of life, all of this is a stepping stone towards unity with God.
That's right.
And in all those stages, the early purgative stage, when we're still caught up in me, I got to get this, I got to do this. The luminous stage can be very self-centered too. I want to be holy.
Yeah.
I want to be closer to Jesus. I want to. The unitive stage is Jesus.
No, finish.
Glory.
The unity stage is to know, and even though God's will may be that you don't understand, even there, you do it quickly. Because it doesn't matter anymore whether you like it or don't like it. It's only He wills it. You see the difference? We're struggling here and we're struggling there, but now we're got to that point, Lord, whatever you want, I want. I don't want any other thing. So that brings my needs down quite a bit. You see, what makes us lose peace is I want so many things, you see. And in all this process, LA people have it in their only life, and their one life that they've wanted this and then they wanted that, and what you notice is they get older. Too bad it takes old age. They need less, see. And it's not because they're, rickety-rackety. It's because in their hearts they know that real peace and real happiness and real joy comes from that union of you and God. And if you're lonely, it's okay. If you've lost everybody, well, you miss them, but that's okay. You're on your way there. If things don't go your way, we'll make something do. There's not that struggle to do what I want to do. See, it's the greatest peace we can have.
The freeingness of unity. And I've been really selfish now because I want to ask you all kinds of questions, and I know we have emails and phone calls that I want to ask you. So we better take a break. We'll be back in just a moment, and then we'll give you a chance to ask Mother some questions, both in your phone calls or email. So we'll be right back in a moment. Welcome back to the Journey Home. My guest is Mother Angelica. What a great pleasure this is. We were just talking during the break that she has not often had this kind of opportunity to talk in this format.
I like it.
And I hope you do too. I hope you enjoy her opportunity to share some spiritual insights in relationship to her own journey for our benefit, to help us walk closer to Jesus our Lord. And I always love the way your program used to begin. We're going to talk about Jesus.
Yeah.
And that to me has been the commitment of what the Journey Home is all about.
That's what all our journey, everyone's journey is the same. Different places, different state in life, but it's all the same journey.
Following Jesus. Let's take our first caller. This is Lynn from Anchorage. Hello, Lynn. What's your question for us?
Oh, hello, Mother Angelica. It's so awesome to see you on the Journey Home. My question is, what's the first step for a young woman who loves God, but doesn't know how to tell if that feeling might be the beginning of a vocation? Should she go talk to a priest, or what if she's not getting any encouragement from anybody she knows? What should she do?
Well, I think a vocation is a call. It isn't something you choose from 20 other things you could do. It's a call. And the call is to find out, is this the call to holiness we have? or is it a call to complete dedication? See? And many confuse the call to holiness with call to conversion or religious vocation. See? That's the first thing you have to discern. And there you have to know, are you married? Well, then if you're married and have children, you're called to holiness because you can't have a religious vocation. But if you're free and you're of age, the age that they accept religious vocations, then you have it in your heart, I would begin to look. It's very simple. You have to find out, do I want to be a contemplative? Do I want to be an active order? Do I want to take care of children, the elderly? Then I would look for that particular way of life. And there are religious orders of every way of life you can think of. Then I would visit. And all this time praying. If you go from place to place to place and you don't really find it, then I would take it that God wants you to live perhaps a single life, a consecrated life perhaps, or just a single life of someone who knows God and loves God. And then you can arrange your day between your work, your family, your extended family, your neighborhood family, how you can help them. You're going to Mass, looking at your life and doing some things for others. You can arrange your life in such a way that it's really religious, though you're in the world. All the religious men and women of the past, like St. Catherine of Siena, she was not in an order. She wore a third order habit, but she was not religious as we consider it today.
Was it Rosa Lehman the same
Rosa
way?
Lehman was the same. So in that way, you got to find out what is God calling you to, you see. But we also have to understand that God calls many, many people, all people, everybody, to some kind of dedication to Him, because you were created by God for God and to be with God forever. But we all do it in a different way.
And the beauty of what I've discovered in the Catholic perspective is that it isn't just me and Jesus.
No.
You know, what God, what are you calling me to do? We're being
Yeah.
sent.
Yeah.
It's a part of the church.
Right.
Our gifts are for the work, the good of the kingdom, the good of the body.
There's where the mystical body comes
Yeah.
in, because whatever I do, if I am called, affects the whole body of Christ.
Let's take our first email. This is from David Spandolino. You talked about being resigned and then being conformed to God's will. Does the ability to be conformed come from grace, or it is an act of the will? And if it's an act of the will, how can I learn to control my will in unity with Christ? There's that mystery there.
It's the desire to be conformed is a grace from God. He inspires you to come higher in a different realm. Your will has to say yes. Your will has to accomplish what you just said yes to. And even though we may fail every so often and kind of bounce back to resignation, that's okay. Come up and say, Lord, you know I love you. Like Peter, you know all things, Lord. You know I love you. And I want to do your will, and only your will. Now, the more we do that little exercise, you see, it's like anything. We exercise our will. We exercise our desire to be holy. It comes to a point where conformity is easy. Conformity is almost immediate.
Easier.
From exercise. It becomes easier.
Yeah.
It's a combination of His grace and your yes. They have to go together.
And you know, this is one of the beauties also of Catholic theology, because there's a large segment of our separated brethren that believes in the complete depravity of the will.
No.
The inability, we do not have freedom of the will. We do not have freedom to respond. Which then, when you take that out of the equation, it leaves everything up to God. You're either predestined or you're not. You're elected or not. And in the essence, it throws even the evil back on God. Like, what if I didn't have the grace?
Right.
What if I didn't get the grace to make that? Well, was that my fault or God's?
I know. But you see, God gave us free will. The reason it's free is I can say yes or no to God. But that doesn't mean I can do as I please, when I please, how I please. It means that he's giving me an opportunity and giving himself the joy of you loving him so much, you're more than willing to do something you really don't want to do.
Let's take our next caller. This is Sheila from Louisville. Hello, Sheila. What's your question tonight?
Yes, Mother Angelica, you've had such an interesting journey, and I was wondering, what do you think is the most amazing thing that God has ever asked of you?
Oh, that's a big one. I think the most amazing thing is leaving my mother. For the simple reason, she was always heartbroken. She cried every day. When I was a kid and went to school, I was always afraid. She was very suicidal. But when I had the courage to say, goodbye, Mom, she didn't realize what I meant, you see. Because she went to the right to go to her office, and I went this way every morning. And that was very difficult for me. And I was amazed at the grace. I've been amazed at all the wonderful things God has done for his people out of a tiny inspiration. See, it's scary to me. None of these were great big things that happened, and I said, oh, isn't that wonderful? Sometimes it was a phone call I made that changed the entire aspect of this whole network. It could have been, I could have said no to it because it didn't make sense. That amazes me. When the baby said to, the child Jesus said to me, build me a temple. I didn't even know what a temple was. And I will help those who help you. And I didn't want to tell anybody. But it began, and I'm like a kid in a big field, a baseball field or a football field, and I watch him working. You know, to me, that's absolutely amazing. You know, the Lord has asked us to build many things and do many things. If I want to look at the greatest thing he's done, I think it's the temple. All the things we've done are communications, and they feed the mind.
Yeah. And the heart, though, they do.
Yeah, they feed the heart.
Yeah.
But the temple seems to be different. It reaches into the soul. And it happens every day, one after another. Reaches down into the soul until they feel there's something wrong in my life. Awesome. And these kind of people can jump from nowhere up to unity. That's the awesome thing to me.
Yeah.
You see, that I see people haven't been to confession for years, haven't done a thing for God for years, haven't even wanted to do anything for God, and suddenly they walk in that temple and they see themselves in a whole new way.
A spiritual mirror.
And some of them just fall flat on the floor. And their lives have so totally changed. It's amazing. See? So, you know, we've done everything to teach, to bring the faith back, to bring people back to the Lord and back to church. But the temple is something different. I'm not too sure yet what it will do. But it's different because it almost snaps a person here and puts him right there. Yeah.
I think in many ways your life, if we look at the things that the Lord has been able to do with you, should have us look at our lives and see what the Lord could do through us if we were willing to say yes.
Yes, you have
Lord,
to say yes.
Whatever you want to do, where you have me, I'm teller in a bank. What can you do for me here?
Right.
Through me here. Let's take our next email. This is Lewis Hampton from Columbia, South Carolina. You spoke of union with the Lord. What if I fear that union? He may ask something of me I'm not yet prepared to accept. Has that ever happened to you, Mom?
Yes, I think that's a temptation, you know. And I think we do an injustice to God because he's not there to grab something from you. He's there to ask you, you see. And if you say no, he'll do something else with you and wait till you're ready. He's a loving God, a compassionate God. But I would strongly suggest that if you're sure God is asking you for anything, go do it. But the only thing he really asks is a total conversion. And that has to happen almost every day. I have to get up in the morning and say, Lord, I wasn't too patient yesterday. I really messed things up. I want the grace today to be like you, you know? All of a sudden, I'm starting the day then with an act of humility. I know I goofed. Secondly, I know I can do it again today. But thirdly, I know who can help me. I also know if I say yes to him in the smallest thing, he's going to flood me with grace. See, God gives a lot more than we can give. And he never asks anything. You know that beautiful poem of Francis. He said to Francis, what I took from thee, I took not for your harm, but only that you would seek it in my arms. And if you could remember that, if that person who's asking the question could remember that one thing, whatever he asks is never for your harm.
Mother, I'm going to ask you a question about how we can pray for you. Now let me set this up. I'm one that believes that every one of us needs to read the book of Job and put ourselves in the story as if God and the devil are talking, and God says, well, look at my servant Mark.
Yeah.
And the devil says, well, you give him to me and I'll challenge him. In what ways in your spiritual journey are the struggles there for you in your spiritual journey that we can pray for you and the sister?
Oh, yeah, because first of all, as you get older, it isn't that you're not sure you did the right thing. You're always, sometimes the temptation is there. Did you do it really for Jesus? See? We have my own soul I have to look after, because St. Paul says, what does it profit if I save the whole world and lose my own soul, you see? So I need prayers for myself. I need prayers for my sisters who consistently pray before the Blessed Sacrament for everybody in the world. And sometimes because of this massive communication media that the Lord has given us, we hear of people who have been converted, but it's that constant giving. And we cannot want to know. We can't desire to know the fruits. And that's the problem of contemplative life. A lay person go out and educate someone or teach someone, and they see that person blossom. That is not true or so in contemplative life. So my sisters need prayers that they persevere in the darkness of faith, that they persevere in hope, and that they persevere in love, because they have Jesus, and they have learned they have to be satisfied with God alone, you see. And we need prayers for the network, you see. We need the prayers that it will continue to grow and continue to draw people back to Jesus. That's exciting. Exciting.
Mother, we have 1 minute. Could you give a parting word of encouragement on maybe a caller that would like to grow closer to Christ?
Yes. It's very easy to grow closer to Jesus. Tell him very often during the day, Jesus, I love you. We all want to hear that, and he wants to hear it too. Jesus, make me holy. And then during the day when things are hard or easy or good, somebody gives you a piece of cherry pie, say, oh, thank you, Jesus. If you get a big corn on your big toe, thank you, Jesus. Little things. See, don't try to do big things. Little things like that all day long makes you holy faster than anything else.
Mother, thank you so much for joining
you're
us
welcome.
on the journey. What a wonderful pleasure. Got to have you back.
Anytime.
And thank you for joining us on the journey home. Monday nights now live. We'll see you again next week. God bless.